Hey everyone, in this video I am going to share with you how to make the most delicious lemon shortbread cookies. You can also use this as a great tart crust, and I will link below to another recipe that uses this cookie dough as a pie crust or a tart crust. So let's get started. This is super simple. And it doesn't take very long. So we are going to start. The link to the recipes with all the ingredient amounts and the written description are up on the blog, links below. We're going to start with our almond flour, and we're going to toss that in our food processor. We have ground chia seeds. In they go. Now, you can buy ground chia seeds, but I have found that you can grind them just as well at home in a blender or a high-speed food processor, blender like a Vitamix or a Blendtec. They do take quite a while to grind if you're grinding your own. But I've never had the problem of them turning into chia butter. Like, you have to be careful, particularly if you're using a Vitamix or a high-powered blender. You do have to be careful not to turn things like nuts into butter. Chia seeds, I've never had that problem, and they do take a little bit of time to do. If you're going to do that, I've always had great success with doing them myself, so I have stopped buying them pre-ground because they're more expensive. You can use black or white chia seeds. It makes absolutely no difference except in the look of your cookies. So white chia seeds will give you a prettier cookie because they're not dark, but the black work just as well, and you may actually prefer the look of the black chia seeds when they're ground up. So we are going to add our sweetener. Oops, missed a bit there. And we're going to add our xanthan gum. We're also going to add our lemon zest, and I'm going to zest this straight into here because I'm not a fan of doing dishes that don't need to be done. So the fastest and most effective way to zest lemons is with a microplane. It goes much quicker than using the small grating on a regular box grater. I will also link below, there is a short video on zesting and juicing lemons and limes. So if you're new to the kitchen, take a look at that. There'll be some tips and tricks in there for you. Always the tips and tricks that make life easier and cooking more fun. I love lemon, and I love the smell that you get when you're grating fresh zest off. If you want super lemony cookies, you can simply add another lemon's worth of zest at this point and get them really tangy and delicious. They're delicious as they are, but if you are like me and you really love the lemon, feel free to add more zest. So we've got everything in here, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pulse this a couple of times just to mix all of the ingredients together so that they're evenly distributed. This is particularly important for the gum that we added. You want it to be when you add the butter, you don't want the xanthan gum to be in one clump. So we're just going to pulse. Just a few times, just until you can see that all of the dry ingredients are uniformly mixed together. So that's what it should look like there. Now we are going to add our butter. Now I did this in advance because watching somebody cut butter into little squares is possibly more exciting than paint drying because it involves butter, but it's not that exciting. So let me pull out the ones I did earlier. Okay, now the reason I did this in advance was because it's super hot here in Connecticut, and even if you're using butter straight out of the fridge, by the time you've weighed it and cut it and handled it, the butter will start to melt. And what makes the texture of this shortbread as much like shortbread as it is using super cold butter. So what I did, and if you're in a hot place or warm place, or your kitchen is very warm, I suggest you do the same. Is you get your butter out of the fridge, you weigh it and you chop it, put it on a plate like this, and put it back in the fridge until you are ready to put the butter into your dry ingredients. So I've got my plate of little butter chunks, and I'm going to toss them into the dry ingredients in the food processor. But I'm not just going to tip them all in a heap. I am actually going to try and distribute them evenly so that they don't all get stuck together in one big lump. So just putting the cold butter in here. I'm actually at this point, I'm just going to stir that around so that the chunks of butter get coated in the dry mix, which will stop them sticking together to make one big buttery clump. So the reason for doing this, and the reason why cold butter is important, is because if you used melted butter or softened butter, when you process this, you would get a batter rather than a dough. You would get a very soft dough, but also with the butter melted, you would actually blend it into the dry ingredients. Then in the oven, you would get a much different texture. So the butter will, to some extent, stay in little lumps in your dough, which stops the dry ingredients all blending together and means that you will get that characteristic short, bready kind of texture. So the cold butter does make a material difference, and cutting it into pieces makes a material difference to the shortbreadiness of your cookies. So yes, it is important, and if your butter is too warm, you will not get the texture that you're looking for. So I've got all my cold butter cubes in there. I'm going to put the lid back on, and then I'm just going to pulse it. Now it normally takes about 15 pulses. You just want to pulse it until it resembles fine breadcrumbs. Now my butter is super cold, so it's going to take another few pulses. Now, I think you can see that that is now resembling our breadcrumbs. So we just want to do a few more pulses and it will start to ball together into a dough. see it's coming together now. Okay. So I am going to remove my dough here. And I'm going to tip it onto my surface. And we're just going to lightly knead there. It literally took 2 turns to get that to come together into a soft dough. Now, what you want to do is, oh, the lemons smell lovely. I can smell that zest in there now. What you want to do is you want to roll this into a sausage shape, which is about 1.5 inches in diameter, although really you can do you at this point, as long as your cookies are all an even thickness and size so that they bake evenly. You can make these, if you want to make a shorter, fatter roll, you can. You'll just get bigger cookies. So roll your dough so that it's approximately the diameter of the cookies that you want. And then if it's not too warm where you are, if your hands aren't too warm, if it's not summer, this is the point at which you would slice your dough into cookies, you would put them on your sheet, and you would pop them in the oven. However, because it is so warm here today, I'm going to show you something that I do under these circumstances. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have actually done this before with regular pre-keto refrigerator cookies. So what we're going to do, and this is simply to make this easier for you to handle and less difficult for you to manage, is I'm actually going to roll this up in parchment. And the best way to do that is to lay it on the top and then roll it backwards and then forwards like that. And I'm going to put this roll into the fridge, and I'm going to let it firm up again for about half an hour, or you can leave it longer than that, because it just makes it a lot easier to slice when your hands are warm and the kitchen's hot. So I'm going to pop this in the fridge to firm, and we'll be right back. Hey everyone, we are back with our lemon shortbread cookies. My cookies in their little roll have been in the fridge for quite a while, so it's really, really firm. Now, you don't need to do this part, putting the dough in the fridge. That's just a little extra to make it easier for you if your hands are really warm, your kitchen's really warm, it's the middle of summer. It will make your dough easier to handle, but if it's okay for you to just cut it straight up when you've made it, then that is absolutely fine. You can skip the putting it in the fridge step, it's not required. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to get your tray ready. You're also going to put your oven on 300 degrees F. Now there's 3 ways that you can prep a tray for these cookies. You can use a silicone mat. You can oil the tray with avocado or coconut oil. Just brush a little bit on the tray. Or what I'm going to do, because I did have my roll in the fridge, which I wrapped up in parchment paper, I am just going to use that parchment paper. Waste not, want not, as my mother used to say. I am going to use that parchment paper to line my tray, so that's all you need. So that's budget Carrie coming to the fore. Now I have my roll here. If you are not putting them in the fridge to firm up the dough, if you're using them straight away, your dough will be softer, and I recommend using a serrated knife, which is one that looks like waves, and using a sawing action, because when the dough is soft, if you use this kind of knife and push down, you're going to make your cookies, you're going to squish the shape of the cookies. Now if you don't care about that, fine, but if you do and you don't want to squish your cookies when the dough is still quite warm, then again, sawing action with a serrated knife will stop you squishing your cookies. Now mine has been in the fridge and is very firm, so I am just going to go ahead and use my chef's knife because the dough is too firm for it to squish down. And then I'm just going to put the cookies on the tray here. You can cut these as thick as you like. I recommend about 1/4 inch thick slices. The only thing you really need to watch is that they're all uniform. So uniform in diameter and uniform in thickness, so that they all bake at the same time and get the same doneness in terms of colour. So that is the only caveat. Plus, if you make them very thick, you'll probably see my end there is a bit thicker than the others, so I'm going to take that bit off. The only caveat is if you make your cookies super thick, you will probably need to bake them for a little bit longer to make sure they are done. But as long as they're all even thickness, it doesn't matter what that thickness is. So I'm just slicing my cookies here. Obviously, if you slice these thicker or thinner, you're going to get more or less cookies. I have 20 and some ends. These do not spread much. And out of this one, this is going to be my test cookie, because you know when you're making cookies there's always a test cookie. So I'm just going to roll that up and squish that out. We've got that there. And so now these are going to go in the oven for about 20 to 23 minutes. So I recommend setting a timer, because life is busy, and if you get interrupted you're going to have burnt cookies, which nobody wants. So I recommend putting the timer on for 18 minutes and checking at 18 minutes and then keeping a close eye on them until they are done. So I'm going to pop them in the oven, and I will see you back here with our baked cookies. Hi everyone, I have just pulled these delicious lemon shortbread cookies out of the oven. Of course, don't forget to use your mitt in your excitement, because these trays are very hot, obviously just coming out of the oven. It wouldn't have been the first time I had excitedly retrieved a pan from the oven and forgot my mitt. So use your mitt, bring them out. Now these cookies are, they're firm, so that they're golden brown as you can see, and they're firm, but they do give a little. if you're wondering, are these done? They do give a little. They're soft, but they're not like cake. So what you want to do is you want to leave them on the tray until they have cooled down a bit, because they will be less fragile and they'll be easier to move. I suggest you either use something like this, or preferably, because it's a lot thinner, something like this. This is called an offset palette knife. Offset because it has this bit here which makes it easier to lift things. So I'm going to do it. They're really hot, but I'm going to do it. You have to be very careful. The hotter they are, the more careful you have to be, because they are still fragile at this point. It will be a lot easier for you to remove them from the tray once they have cooled down somewhat. There's my trial. Once they've cooled down, I don't know if you can see that as I'm pushing them, they will actually change shape still at this point because they are very hot. So give them about 10 or 15 minutes to cool down. You'll find they will have firmed up significantly, and it will be a lot easier for you to use your spatula to get them off the tray. And then you need to step away from the cooling rack, and you need to wait until they are completely cold. And you will find that the texture is much more shortbready at that point. So don't be like Carrie and take them off when they're hot, unless you're a offset spatula wielding ninja. Leave them to cool, then take them off and wait until they're completely cold on your cooling rack. And there are your beautiful lemon shortbread cookies.